Welcome, dear traveler. You've arrived, not by accident, and not by design. Perhaps the world has grown too loud, or perhaps it has grown too quiet. Maybe you're carrying questions you cannot name, or wounds that never found the right words. Here, on this still water, there floats an empty boat. No oars, no name, no one steering, and yet it drifts gently to meet you. This channel is called the empty boat, a place where stories drift through the mist like autumn leaves, where silence speaks, and each tale is a soft lantern offered to your tired spirit. Over the next few hours, you will hear 25 Zen stories whispered from the forest, echoed from ancient temples, remembered in the breath between thoughts. They are not teachings, they are not answers, they are mirrors, soft steps into the mountains of your own heart. Let them wash over you, let them settle into the spaces where worry once lived. Let them remind you how to come home, to yourself. Take a breath with me now, in and out. You are safe, you are welcome, and nothing is required of you except to listen. Slowly, like listening to rain on old wooden eaves. Let us begin. Story 1. The Cup That Poured Itself. Soft sound of distant temple bell, wind rustling through pine leaves. There was a man who could not sleep. By all appearances, he had everything. A house made of polished cedar and stone. A family portrait. In the hallway, smiling faces painted in perfect light. A leather-bound planner filled with deadlines, meetings, future ambitions. Even his pillow was made of imported silk, filled with rare buckwheat husk. But each night, as the world fell silent, something stirred within him. Not peace, not calm, but a restless unease. His mind turned like a mill in the wind, grinding thoughts that never became flour. He had learned to function with this insomnia, drinking bitter tea, practicing yoga from a popular app, journaling his gratitude, but none of it helped. One day, after a meeting that left him feeling like a ghost in a suit, he heard an old colleague speak of a Zen monk who lived in the northern hills. He doesn't advertise, she said, but people find their way to him when it's time. That night, unable to breathe beneath the weight of silence, the man packed a small bag, left a note on the table, and drove into the misty ridgelines. The journey the temple was small, no gate, no sign, just a crooked path between pines and moss-covered stone. It didn't look like a place of answers. It looked forgotten, yet something about its stillness made him pause. He knocked gently on the old wooden door. No response, just the faint smell of jasmine and incense. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, the air was cool and dark. Candles flickered without wind. Sitting on a tatami mat near a kettle was the monk, thin, robed in grey, his eyes closed. "I'm here for guidance," the man said awkwardly. The monk opened one eye, then both. He bowed. Silently he gestured to the floor. They sat. The man began to speak. "I've read so many books. I've tried meditation, exercise, therapy. I've made a fortune. I've built a life. But still, I can't stop thinking. I feel like I'm missing something. I want to learn how to empty my mind. I want peace. Do you understand?" The monk nodded gently. He picked up the kettle and an old ceramic teacup cracked around the rim. Without a word, he began to pour. The man watched as the cup filled, then brimmed, then overflowed. Tea spilled onto the floor. Still, the monk poured. "Stop," the man shouted. "It's already full, can't you see?" The monk smiled. "You are the cup," he said softly, "and I am the tea." The meaning beneath. The steam that single moment stunned the man more deeply than any lecture ever could. He saw it suddenly, painfully, how his mind was always full of seeking, fixing, grasping, full of beliefs and ambitions. Even his suffering had become a possession he refused to release. He had come looking for peace, but brought along 1,000 plans on how to receive it. He had not arrived with space-only strategy. How could peace pour into a vessel already brimming? The monk wiped the floor with a cloth and gestured for him to try again, this time in silence. The man sat with his breath. He let go of the story he had prepared. He let go of the urge to explain. He let go of the fear that there may be no answer. And, in that letting go, something opened. Not a grand revelation, not a vision, just space. And from that space, a warmth knot, in the mind, in the body, in the breath, like tea slowly seeping through porcelain, a reflection from the sutras. Just as a pot with a crack will leak, so too a mind filled with pride will not retain wisdom. Dhammapada Buddha often taught not through accumulation, but through subtraction. Wisdom, he said, is not something you collect. It is something revealed when the noise subsides, like a clear sky after the storm clouds pass. It is not added to your life, it returns to you when distractions fall away. To approach Dhamma, one must come like the empty bowl, like the beginner's mind in Zen Shoshin, ready to receive without assuming. The man came for a method. The monk offered a metaphor, and in that poetic act, teaching poured deeper than any doctrine. A modern mirror. The psychology of overfilling in modern psychology, we might call the man's struggle cognitive saturation. The brain, overstimulated, flooded with unresolved inputs, creates a loop of restlessness. Thinking becomes a defense mechanism, a false attempt at control in a world that cannot be controlled. So we fill ourselves with information books, podcasts, news with self-improvement, more goals, more tools, even with healing content, therapy, retreats. But when the intention is driven by fear, even these become clutter, like organizing your home while refusing to let go of what's breaking your back. What we often need is not more input, but permission to stop pouring, to sit, to breathe, to let the water settle. Only then can we see through the depths. A whisper for the sleepless if you are listening now. Perhaps you, too, have trouble sleeping. Perhaps your pillow feels soft, but your thoughts are sharp. Perhaps you've tried to fix yourself so many times that even healing feels like a chore. Can I invite you, just for this moment, to let go? Let go of trying to empty the mind. Let go of doing it right. Let go of needing this story to work. Instead, just breathe. Feel your chest rise and fall. Let the words flow like warm tea, no need to hold them. Let them pass through. You are the cup. But tonight, let yourself be the empty cup. Not broken, not lacking, simply ready, final. Reflection, a meditation for letting go as we close this first story. I offer you this gentle practice. Close your eyes. Imagine you are sitting in a small wooden room in the hills. There is a kettle beside you, steam curling upward, scent of jasmine and pine. Before you sits an old monk. He picks up the kettle. You offer him your cup, but this time your cup is empty, not because you have nothing, but because you are ready to receive. Let him pour. Let the warmth fill your hands. Let the warmth fill your hands. Let silence be the taste. And as you sip, smile. There is nothing more to do. Story 2. The shadow under the lotus pond. Gentle flute music playing. Light water ripple sounds in background somewhere on the edge of the temple grounds, where the old pine forest softened into a clearing of reeds and fallen leaves. There was a pond. Not a large one, not grand, but it had a quiet beauty, oval-shaped, bordered with cracked stone, and in the summer it bloomed with pale pink lotuses that glistened with dew. The monks called it Mirror Pond, though it didn't always reflect one. Overcast afternoon, a child came to the pond with a small bamboo net and a tin bucket. His name was Min. Min was not a monk. He was an orphan taken in by the temple after his village was lost to fire. No one knew where his parents had gone. Some said they perished. Some whispered they had fled. But Min did not speak of them. Instead, he swept leaves, fetched water, and watched the monks pray. But he did not pray himself, not yet. The boy and the shadow that day. Min crouched by the pond, peering into the water. He was not looking for fish or frogs. He was watching a shadow, his own, but it didn't look like him. The shadow was too tall, too sharp, its mouth too wide, its hands distorted, stretching through the water like claws. He flinched and stepped back, and yet the shadow remained. Why? Do you follow me? He whispered to it. Why don't you go away? The wind stirred the surface, and for a moment the shadow disappeared. But when it calmed, it was still there. The old monk appears, a quiet footstep behind him. It was the old monk Master Duan. His face was soft like worn linen, and his eyes always seemed to smile without moving his lips. He sat beside the boy without a word. Min didn't look up. There's something wrong with the pond, he said. It makes things look strange, ugly. The monk looked at the water, then at the child. No, he said gently. The pond shows things exactly as they are, even the things we wish not to see. The boy's brow furrowed. But that thing, it's not me. It can't be. The monk reached into his robe and pulled out a smooth pebble, placing it in the boy's hand. Drop this into the pond, he said. Min did. Ripples moved outward, and the shadow was gone, but the monk pointed. Look again. The ripples faded, and slowly the shadow returned. The story of the Shadow Master long ago, the monk began. There was a man who was terrified of his own shadow. He would wake at dawn and see it stretching long behind him. No matter where he ran, it chased him. He hid in caves, climbed trees, even tied cloth over his eyes. But the shadow followed. One day, exhausted, he collapsed beneath a fig tree. I give up, he cried, and in that moment, he stopped running. He looked down, and he saw that his shadow was just himself, standing between the sun and the earth. Min was silent. The monk continued. Since that day, he became known as the Shadow Master, not because he made his shadow disappear, but because he bowed to it, and in bowing became its friend. The child's heart. Min stared at the pond again. This time, he didn't recoil. He let his shadow remain. He even moved his hand, watched how the shadow moved too. He whispered, Are you really me? And the shadow seemed to nod. Min turned to the monk. Why do I feel like something's wrong inside? Like something's broken. The old man put a warm hand on the boy's shoulder. Not broken, little one. Just unseen. The Buddha's mirror within this fathom-long body and mind is found the world. The origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world. The Buddha, SN 12.33 in Zen and early Buddhist thought alike. The mind is often likened to a pond. Still water reflects clearly. Stirred water distorts. But beneath the distortion, the image remains whole. The Buddha taught that our suffering arises not from the shadow itself, but from our refusal to look. When fear arises, we push it away. When sadness appears, we distract. When guilt comes, we run. But what we run from stays. And so we must turn, gently, to face the reflection, not to fix it, but to understand it, to bow to the shadow as part of the light. Modern pain, the hidden child within in psychology. There is a term, the wounded inner child. It speaks to the part of us that experienced fear, neglect, or trauma before we had the tools to process it. When left unacknowledged, this part remains frozen in time and internal shadow. Adults carry these shadows silently. The child who was abandoned may become the adult who fears. Closeness, the child who was silenced, may become the adult who overspeaks or hides. The child who was blamed may become the adult who apologizes for existing. But these are not flaws, they are messages, and like Min by the pond, healing begins not by pushing them away, but by turning toward them with kindness, by asking, "Are you really me?" And listening. A night of stillness that evening, Min sat again by the pond. The sky was dark now, the moon full, casting soft silver over the lotus leaves. The wind was quiet. So was he. The shadow was there. He smiled at it. "I'm not afraid anymore," he whispered. And maybe, just maybe, the shadow smiled back. The next morning, a monk found Min sweeping the temple steps, humming softly. For the first time, his eyes looked like they belonged not to a child lost, but a child home. A practice for your own shadow, wherever you are listening now, perhaps there are shadows in you too. A memory, a regret, a fear you can't name. I invite you now, gently, to try this. Close your eyes. Imagine a still pond. You are sitting by it. The wind is calm. Now look into the water. What do you see? Don't rush. If something dark appears, don't panic. It is not here to harm you. It is just asking to be seen. Place your hand on your heart and say inwardly, "You belong. I see you now." Breathe in and out again, and let that be enough. Final whisper. The lotus of your life, you are not broken. You are the pond. You are the ripple. You are the reflection. And within you, somewhere, a lotus is blooming, not despite the shadow, but because of it. Story 3. The storm that didn't come. Background, slow, low-string drones, light thunder far away, wind rustling through bamboo. The house was old, but it stood like a stubborn tree against the ridge. Its wooden planks creaked with every wind, the windows rattled when night fell, and its stone chimney leaned ever so slightly, like a man who had seen too much to still stand straight. Inside that house lived an old woman named Qo. Every morning, she lit a stick of incense to the east. Every evening, she counted the matches in the drawer. And before bed, she placed a single candle on the table. Even if she never lit it, it was for the storm. She had been waiting for it her whole life. The fear that stayed the villagers often passed her house and whispered, "She's still alone after all these years." I heard she was caught in the typhoon of '63, doesn't even have a radio. But none of them ever knocked. Qo had long stopped caring what people thought. What mattered was being prepared. She had 7 jugs of water in the basement, 3 crates of dried rice, 22 candles, 2 extra blankets, a list of instructions written in faded ink. If the wind comes from the north, shut the windows. If the glass breaks, use the table as shelter. If the roof lifts, go underground. Do not panic. Do not run. She had memorized every line, but year after year, the storm never came. The knocket was a late autumn evening. Just before the winds turned, Kyo had just folded her bedding when she heard a knock, soft, hesitant. She opened the door and found a girl, no older than 20, standing in the dusk, soaked from the mountain mist. "Excuse me," the girl said, shivering. "I got lost on the trail. My phone died. Can I stay the night?" Kyo looked her over. Thin jacket, no pack, city clothes. She nodded once and stepped aside. The girl bowed deeply and entered. 2 lives. 1 room they ate rice and pickled plum in silence. The girl introduced herself. "Fire. I'm not used to this kind of quiet," she said, laughing nervously. "It feels like the trees are listening." "They are," Kyo replied simply. Aya glanced around the room at the candles, the matches, the old wooden beams. "Are you preparing for something?" Kyo didn't answer at first. Then she said, "The storm." Aya blinked. "What storm?" Kyo's voice was steady. "The one that's always about to arrive." The girl said nothing, unsure whether to laugh or be afraid. Midnight wind that night. As wind brushed the house, Aya couldn't sleep. She wandered into the main room and found Kyo still awake, sitting near the candle. "You don't sleep much?" Aya asked. "Only when I know it's safe." Kyo said. Aya wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Have you ever faced a storm here?" Kyo looked out the window. "No, not here. But once, long ago, I did." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. The silence between them became a kind of story itself. Then Kyo turned to Aya and said, "Let me tell you a Zen parable. It may help you understand. As a child, his house was torn away in a hurricane. He lost his father that day. So he built a new house on a hill, reinforced with stone, layered with rope and iron and prayers. He installed bells to warn him, instruments to measure pressure, charts, plans, rituals, but he never left the hill, not once. People admired his caution. Some called him wise, others called him haunted, but the wind never came again. One day, near death, the man whispered, 'I spent my whole life waiting for the wind and missed the sky. What do we protect?' Aya sat still for a while, then whispered, 'Is that why you stay here? So the wind won't surprise you?' Kyo nodded, but her eyes were distant. 'It's not just the wind,' she said. 'It's what it took from me.' Aya asked gently, 'What did it take?' 'My son Kyo replied. 40 years ago.' The words hovered like smoke. 'I see,' Aya said. 'And since then, you've waited?' 'Yes, I built a life of shelter. But I see now,' Kyo's voice faltered. 'I have been living under a roof that was never broken.' She looked at the candle. 'Maybe I became the storm.' The Buddha. On fear, he who fears what is not to be feared, and does not fear what is to be feared, such a one is confused, ever wandering the wrong path. Dhammapada, verse 317. The Buddha spoke of fear not as evil but as misplaced energy. We fear loss, but not clinging. We fear storms, but not the shelter that imprisons. We fear the dark, but forget to fear forgetting the light. Kyo feared the return of a storm, but had not noticed the way fear had become the storm itself. Fear that protects is useful. Fear that imprisons is suffering disguised as safety. Psychology of control in trauma psychology. This is called anticipatory defense. The brain, once exposed to danger, creates a map of potential threats and builds patterns to prevent re-experiencing pain. It's natural, but when left unchecked, these defenses become a prison. We avoid intimacy to prevent loss over, prepare to avoid chaos, numb ourselves, to avoid grief, but life is not asking for perfection. It is asking for presence. Fear says, you must prepare. Wisdom says, you must live. And healing begins, not when the storm ends, but when we stop waiting for it to begin. The candle lit at dawn before Aya left the next morning. She found Kyo lighting one of her old candles, not for the storm, but for the sunrise. The light flickered. Gently, I used to think peace was what comes after the storm, Kyo said. But I'm learning. Peace is what I missed while waiting. Aya hugged Hurtley without words. Then she stepped onto the trail and disappeared into the morning mist. Kyo sat in the quiet, eyes closed. The candle danced. The wind passed without fear. A practice for the waiting heart, wherever you are listening. Perhaps there is a storm you have been preparing for, a diagnosis that hasn't come, a rejection that hasn't happened, grief that might return. May I offer you this practice. Close your eyes. Picture a room inside you. It is filled with candles. You enter one by one. You walk around the room and light them, not because the storm has come, but because the morning has dot with each light. Say silently, I am not waiting anymore. I am here. I am safe. Let the breath carry that safety. Let the wind pass through you. You are not made of straw. You are made of stillness. Final whisper. The storm is not the end. Storms will come. Some will take, some will teach, but most will pass before they ever touch you. Do not miss the sky. Do not miss the candlelight. Do not miss the life that wants to meet you between the winds. Story 4. Sweeping the leaves that never stop falling. Background, the sound of dry leaves rustling, the soft brush of a broom, bamboo wind chimes distant. In the early mornings at Cloud Heart Temple, long before the bell called the monks to meditation, there was always one sound that echoed gently through the courtyard. She. The sound of sweeping. A young monk named Ren had been assigned the task of sweeping the stone courtyard each day. He had been doing it for several weeks. No one else took this task. It was his alone. He swept in silence. He swept with care. But he never finished, because the leaves never stopped falling. The frustration of effort at first. Ren found the task peaceful, a way to calm his thoughts, a rhythm to accompany his breath. But over time, frustration crept in. Every morning, he swept the same stones, tracing the same lines. He cleared every corner, only to look up and find more leaves drifting down. One morning, he shouted up at the trees, "Why do you keep dropping them?" A leaf fluttered down and landed gently on his shoulder, as if answering, "Because that is what we do." Ren clenched his jaw. "I work so hard, and it never ends." The visit of the master that afternoon, Master Guinan passed through the courtyard. He was old, bent like a question mark, and smelled faintly of Sander, LWOOD. He watched Ren sweeping. "You seem troubled," the master said. Ren bowed, wiping sweat from his brow. "I don't understand this task, master. No matter how hard I sweep, more leaves fall. It's pointless. I finish, and it's undone." Master Guinan smiled gently. "Ah, you seek a task that stays done." Ren blinked. "Is that wrong?" The master looked at the trees, which swayed in silence. "Let me tell you a story," he said. The parable of the endless sand. There was once a man assigned to carry sand from the shore to the top of a hill. Master Guinan began. Each day, he filled buckets, climbed, poured, only to watch the wind scatter it. Day after day, he grew angry. One morning, he demanded of the abbot, "Why do you make me do this useless task?" The abbot replied, "Because your task is not to move the sand. Your task is to discover who you are when nothing stays." Master Guinan paused. "And who are you, Ren, when the courtyard never stays clean?" Ren's silence that night. Ren couldn't sleep. He stared at the moon through the paper walls. Its light drifted like smoke across the room. He thought of the leaves. He thought of the endless, sweeping. And he thought of himself, not the monk he was trying to become, not the obedient novice, not the spiritual seeker, just the boy who had always tried to fix things, to make them neat, to feel safe by finishing. But nothing stayed finished. And maybe that wasn't failure. Maybe that was the way. The Buddha on effort and letting go with sustained effort. The wise person shapes the self as a fletcher shapes an arrow. Dhammapada, verse 80, Buddha taught that right effort is not about outcome but presence, to act, without attachment to the fruits, to sweep, not to finish, but to be in the sweeping. This is karma yoga in other traditions, in Zen. It is called samutha, meditation of action, chopping wood, carrying water, sweeping leaves. When we give up the illusion of finality, every moment becomes holy. The leaf that falls is not a failure. It is an invitation. Modern psychology, the burnout of completionism in our modern world. Many of us live under the tyranny of done. Inbox zero, productivity hacks, perfect checklists. We seek peace in completion, but completion, like a swept courtyard, never lasts. So we burn out, we grow resentful, we feel like failures, not because we aren't doing enough, but because we expected our doing to end the falling. This is called completion anxiety, a psychological trap where peace is always after the next task. But what if peace isn't after? What if peace is within? Within the sweeping, within the falling, within the breath between efforts. Ren's morning shift the next morning. Ren stepped into the courtyard before sunrise. He held the broom loosely. He bowed to the trees, and he swept. The leaves fell as they always did. But this time, he did not curse them. He did not wish them gone. He did not think of the end. He simply swept, and something in him felt light, not because the courtyard stayed clean, but because his heart had stopped resisting the rhythm. The secret of the leaves weeks. Past other monks noticed something different in Ren. He smiled more. He spoke less. His sweeping became like a dance. One day, a novice asked him, "How do you do it every day, knowing the leaves will return?" Ren looked at the trees. A leaf fell between them. He said, "I no longer sweep to make it clean. I sweep because I love the sound of the broom." And the novice, hearing that, understood, not with the mind, with the breath, practice, the sweep of your own life now, wherever you are listening. I invite you into this moment. Is there something you keep doing over and over, hoping it will stay done? Perhaps it's cleaning, healing, explaining yourself, seeking peace. Take a breath. What if today you released the need for the end result? What if you allowed the task to be holy, just because you are alive to do it? Close your eyes, feel the sweep of your breath in and out. This is your broom. Let the leaves fall. Let the rhythm hold. You are not broken. You are the motion. Final whisper, the dance between. Falling and sweeping the trees will not stop dropping their leaves. Life will not stop bringing new moments. And peace is not in once and for all. Peace is in again. Again I rise. Again I breathe. Again I sweep. Not because the task is finished, but because I am free to love the doing, and that is the quietest enlightenment. Story 5. The stone that asked to be lifted. Background: soft wind across dry grass, rhythmic sound of footsteps on gravel, faint rumble like earth breathing. The path to Cloud Heart Temple twisted through cedar groves and low mist valleys, often invisible until one was already walking it. Pilgrims said the path changed. Depending on who walked it, some found wide trails, others found bramble. But there was one thing all of them spoke of. The stone. Not far from the temple gate stood a large, lopsided rock, covered in moss, split down one side. It leaned like it had been halfway moved, then given up on. It blocked just enough of the path to make passing uncomfortable, and no one could remember when it got there. The monk and the bird net. Was early spring when Brother Anzu was assigned trail maintenance. He was young, newly robed, and eager to be useful. When he reached the stone, he saw it as an obstacle to correct. "This will be gone before sundown," he muttered, rolling up his sleeves. He pushed with his shoulder. Nothing. He pried with a stick. The stick snapped. He shoveled at its base. The dirt refused. Hour after hour he worked. By dusk he sat, breathless and blistered. The stone had not moved. The master's question the next morning. Master Jinan passed by and found Anzu staring at the stone, tougher than it looks. The old man asked with a knowing smile. "I don't understand," Anzu sighed. "It shouldn't be this hard. Have you tried listening to it?" Anzu blinked, listening. Master Jinan crouched beside the stone and placed his palm on its surface, closed his eyes, then stood up. "She doesn't want to be moved," he said simply, and walked away. Anzu stared after him, both confused and strangely. Moved the sound beneath stillness that evening. Anzu returned. No shovel, no shovel. No plan. Just himself. He sat beside the stone and placed his hand on its cracked surface. It was cold, solid, but not silent. In the stillness, he began to feel something. A weight, not just physical, but emotional. It reminded him of something old, familiar. A burden never spoken. The stone's voice sounded in the quiet of the twilight. It was as if the stone spoke not in words, but in memory. He remembered being 10, trying to stop his parents from divorcing, sitting between them at the kitchen table, holding both their hands, whispering, "Please, stay. I'll be good." He remembered pushing himself through school, through life, always striving, always carrying more than he showed. He remembered collapsing once in the library, from exhaustion, not from reading, but from holding everything in. And now, this stone, this unmoving weight, felt like that same burden, not something to move, something to understand. The Zen cone of the stone. When you meet a stone on the path, do not ask how to move it. Ask what it reveals when you stop. Zen saying in Zen, obstacles are not just hindrances, they are mirrors. They show us the parts of the self we push against, the parts we refuse to sit beside. The stone was not an enemy, it was a teacher, and the teaching was not in effort, it was in stillness. The psychology of resistance in modern therapy. We speak often of emotional resistance, the parts of us that tense, avoid, push back. We try to move the stone of grief by staying busy. We try to remove the stone of shame by achieving more. We try to ignore the stone of fear by pretending we don't feel it. But these stones do not go away, because they are not outside us. They are us wounds made solid by time, and healing is not found in removal, but in relationship. The morning shift the next morning. Anzu did not try to move the stone. He brought tea, he bowed to it, and he sat beside it, greeting the pilgrims as they passed. At first, many asked, "Will you move it?" He only smiled. In time, they stopped asking. In time, they too began to pause, to place a hand on it, to breathe. The temple's new tradition months passed. The stone remained, but something changed. Bench was placed nearby. A wind chime hung from a low cedar branch. A wooden sign was added with 4 words, "Rest with the weight." It became a place of stillness, not of fixing, not of changing, but of being an invitation for you wherever you are. Listening now, perhaps there is a stone in your life, something heavy, unmovable, ancient. You've tried to shift it, you've tried to bury it, you've tried to forget it. But what if you tried something else? What if you sat beside it? What if you placed your hand on it? What if you whispered, "I see you, I'm here, let it be enough"? For now, practice a meditation of resting with the weight. Close your eyes. Breathe in gently. Imagine you are standing before a large stone on a quiet path. You don't know why it's there. You only know it has something to show you. Place your hand on it. Feel its stillness, its history, its silence. Now say to it, inwardly, "I do not come to fix you. I come to know you." Breathe again. Stay as long as you need. Let the weight become not a burden, but a teacher. Final whisper. Not all stones are meant to move. Sometimes healing is not about change, it's about companionship. Sometimes growth is not a rising, it's a deepening. Sometimes peace is not found at the top of the path, but beside the stone that waits halfway, asking not to be moved, but to be met. And when you finally sit down beside it, you may find you were never really blocked, only invited. Story 6. The Bell That Rang by Silence. Background, distant echoes of wind through a hollow corridor. Slow, reverent silence. A single bell strike, barely heard. There was a temple that no longer had monks. No incense burned. No chants echoed. The roofs sagged, and vines curled up the columns. It sat in a forgotten valley, nestled between mountains that no longer made maps, but people still came, not in crowds, not often, just one at a time, drawn by a rumor that if you sat still, enough silent, enough you would hear the sound of a bell no one touched. The boy named Tomatoma was 16, and he did not believe in silence. His world was filled with noise, his phone, his playlists, his scrolling mind. At night, he listened to music just to fall asleep, afraid of what the quiet might say if he didn't fill it first. He came to the valley not to find peace, but because of a dare, spend the night in the ghost temple. His friend said, "See if the bell rings." So he packed a snack, a power bank, and a flashlight, and hiked into the dusk. The temple's breathwind. He reached the temple. Night had fallen. The air was colder than he expected. The silence dashed thicker. No lights, no signs, only stone steps vanishing. Into the dark, Toma hesitated, then stepped inside. The hall smelled of moss and something older than age. Dust floated like spirits. The altar was bare, but behind it hung a bell bronze. Tall, unmarked, still, he laughed nervously. Guess that's the bell. He sat, waited. Nothing. He tapped his foot, checked his phone, listened to his music. Still. Nothing. Hours passed. The battery dies. At midnight, his phone flickered and died. No more music, no more light, only breath, only stillness. He felt the walls move not with wind, but memory. He felt watched not by ghosts, but by silence. Panic fluttered in his chest. He stood to leave, but something made him stop. A whisper, a sound. He turned. No one, but he felt it again, not heard, but felt. A pulse from the bell, the first ring. It wasn't a sound like chimes. It wasn't a tone like gongs. It was something beneath sound, like when you hold your breath and feel your heart in your ears, like when someone says your name without speaking. He turned back to the bell. It hadn't moved, but something had changed. In him, he sat again. No phone, no music, just heartbeat and breath, and the silence deepening. The parable of the unstruck bell, a disciple once asked, "When will the bell ring again?" The master answered, "When you have stopped listening for it." Zen Konthor is a bell inside each of us, not of metal, not of sound, but of knowing. It rings not when we seek it, but when we stop seeking. It rings not from hands, but from presence. The more we try to force awakening, the more it hides. But in surrender, in stillness, it echoes, the morning. Light when Toma awoke, it was dawn. He had not meant to sleep. The light poured through the cracked beams, soft and golden. The bell was still there, silent, and yet his chest felt open, as if a weight had slipped away while he dreamed. He stood slowly. He bowed not because he understood, but because something inside him had shifted. He did not take a picture. He did not post. He just walked down the steps and back into the world. What changed? Back in the city, Toma didn't talk about the bell. He went to school. He answered messages. He laughed. But something had changed. He didn't sleep with music anymore. He took slow walks with no destination. He paused, sometimes for no reason, because sometimes, in the noise of it all, he could still feel the bell. Not outside him. Inside, Buddhist insight. The sound of silence there is that dimension where there is neither earth, nor water, nor fire, nor air. Their sound does not echo. Mind does not grasp. And yet, peace resides. Udanina 8.1 The Buddha spoke of a state beyond phenomena, Nibbana, where silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of clarity. In Zen, we call this mutha, unstruck bell, the uncarved block, the awareness beneath thought to reach it. We don't go outward, we return to breath, to stillness, to the bell within. Modern psychology, the power of deep silence. In neuropsychology, silence is not neutral, it is healing. Studies show that 2 minutes of true silence lowers cortisol. Quiet spaces activate the brain's default mode network DMN, which allows for self-awareness and emotional integration. Deep silence improves memory and reduces anxiety. But most importantly, silence makes space for what has been waiting to be heard, and healing begins the moment we stop interrupting it. A practice, hearing the bell within wherever you are now. I invite you into the temple of this moment. Close your eyes. Imagine a great bell before you enter. Still, you do not touch it. You do not strike it. You simply sit and listen to the space between thoughts, to the place before words. Now, inhale, exhale slowly. Let the silence ring and feel your own presence. As echo, final whisper, the bell still rings you. May not believe it now. You may think silence is empty, useless, boring. But when you have listened long enough, truly listened, you may hear it, not a bell, but yourself, ringing not from need, but from being. Not to call others, but to remember that you are always whole, even in stillness, especially in stillness. Story 7. Chasing the Cloud. Background, sound of wind across grassy hills, distant laughter of a child, soft echo of footsteps uphill. On a summer morning when the clouds moved like paper boats across the sky, a boy named Ko climbed the hill behind the temple. He had one intention, to catch a cloud. He had seen them from his window, each day white, weightless, drifting like dreams. Sometimes they took the shape of dragons, sometimes ships. One morning, he swore he saw a cloud. Shaped like his mother's face, he thought, if I could catch one, I could hold beauty. So he packed a jar, a cloth, and a bamboo pole, and he began his climb. The chase begins. The hill was long and uneven. The path wandered through grass, then gravel, then wildflowers. Ko ran, then walked, then ran again. He pointed up, that one, the long one. He waved his pole at it, laughing, chasing its shadow. But the wind was faster. The cloud danced away. Fine, he said. I'll go higher. He climbed. Another cloud closer. He leaped. Swiped his jar. But the jar came back empty. Always the monks. Surprise, at the top of the hill sat a figure beneath a twisted pine. A monk, elderly, with robes like morning mist. He watched as Ko huffed and puffed, waving his pole like a sword. The monk smiled. Are you at war with the sky, little one? I'm trying to catch a cloud, Ko panted. The monk nodded, as if this were perfectly normal. Why? Ko paused. No one had asked him that. I want to keep it, he said. They're beautiful, but they always leave. I want to hold one, so I don't forget. The monk looked up. So you fear forgetting beauty? Ko nodded. The monk tapped the ground beside him. Come, rest. The cloud and the mirror, they sat together in silence. Ko wiped his face with his sleeve. The monk asked, have you ever looked at a cloud and cried? Ko blinked. No, I guess not. Because you know it's not meant to stay, the monk said. That's what makes it gentle. He pointed to a small pond in the distance. Do you see that? The pond does not chase the cloud, but it reflects it perfectly. Ko followed his gaze. A cloud drifted over the water, its image crisp and silent. But the reflection disappears, Ko whispered. Yes, the monk said, but so does the pain of losing it. The parable of the bird in the sky, let me tell you a story, the monk offered. There once was a bird who fell in love with the sky. Every morning it rose higher, hoping to kiss the blue. But the sky remained distant, so the bird flew faster, harder, until its wings bled. But no matter how far it soared, the sky never got closer. One day, exhausted, the bird stopped, sat on a branch, and looked up, and it saw. The sky had always been around it, holding it, carrying it. The bird didn't need to reach the sky. It had only needed to stop chasing it. Realization. Ko sat quietly, eyes fixed on the clouds above. He felt something shift, like a hand unclenching inside him. He opened his jar and let the wind blow through it. No capture, only air, only now. Buddhist insight, the folly of grasping attachment, is the root of suffering. The Buddha, Dhammapada, 212 in Buddhism. Clinging up dana is one of the great fires. We cling to pleasure, we cling to people, we even cling to ideas of self, love, and peace. But all things conditioned are impermanent. Clouds drift, people change, moments pass. When we chase, we suffer. But when we let go, not with apathy, but with reverence, we make space. Space for love that doesn't bind. Space for beauty that doesn't burn. Space for peace. Modern psychology, letting go without losing love. In psychology, we often mistake detachment for disconnection, but healthy. Letting go is not rejection, it is acceptance of reality. It's the understanding that we can love someone deeply without needing them to stay. We can hold memories dearly without replaying them in pain. We can enjoy success without fearing its loss. Letting go is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of freedom. The Disenko rose slowly. The sky was still full of clouds, but he didn't chase them. He watched, smiled, then bowed to the monk. "I'll remember," he said. The monk placed a finger on the boy's chest. "Not with your mind," he whispered. With this, Ko nodded and walked down the hill with an empty jar and a full heart. Practice releasing the cloud wherever you are now. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply. Imagine a single cloud in the sky above you. It is the thing you most want to hold, a person, a dream, a moment. You reach for it, but your hands pass through. It cannot be caught, but it can be seen. It can be honored. Now breathe out and say inwardly, "I let you go." With love, I let you drift. With grace, you do not need to stay, to be part of me. Let the sky be wide again. Let your heart rest. You are not empty. You are spacious, final. Whisper. The beauty that passes through the sky never grieves a cloud's passing, because it knows more will come, different shapes, different softness, each one a gift, each one a teacher, and you are the sky, not the cloud. You do not need to hold what moves. You only need to open and be still enough to receive. Story 8. The monk who broke his bowl. Background, quiet evening wind, sound of ceramic clinking gently, a single bowl rolling across a wooden floor, then stillness. In the quiet kitchens of the hill temple, there was a rule. Every monk cared for their own bowl. It was not just for eating, it was their mirror. It held their hunger, their silence, their breath. And so, each evening after the final meal, the monks would wash their bowls, dry them carefully, and place them on a simple wooden shelf. All but one. Brother Tetsu was still learning, still clumsy with silence. The accident that night, while rushing to sweep before evening bell, Tetsu held his bowl too loosely. His hand slipped. Ceramic met stone. The sound was sharp. A break more intimate than thunder. The bowl rolled once, then stopped, split down the middle. He froze. All noise in the kitchen halted. Two senior monks turned Tetsu, bent quickly, hands trembling. He whispered, "I'm sorry," but no one answered. They only watched him in silence. The weight of the mistaketsu carried the broken pieces to his quarters. He wrapped them in cloth, like a wound. His breath came shallow, his chest heavy. I was trusted, he thought, and I failed. It was not just a bowl. It was the symbol of his place, his belonging. Now, fractured like him, he barely slept that night. He dreamt the bowl whispered, "You are not whole." The master's summons at dawn. A novice came to him. "Master Duan asks to see you." Tetsu bowed. His fingers dug into his robes as he climbed the temple steps. He expected a reprimand, a replacement ceremony, maybe even removal from the order. When he arrived, the old master sat beside a tea kettle, as usual. Tetsu bowed low, offering the wrapped fragments. I broke it," he said. "I deserve whatever consequence follows." The master said nothing. He took the bundle gently, unwrapped the bowl, looked at the crack, then smiled the gold between fragments. "Come back tomorrow," Master Duan said, "and bring rice glue." Tetsu blinked. Rice glue? But the master had already returned to his tea. That night, Tetsu prepared the glue himself. Hands still unsure he expected punishment. Instead, he was given instruction, the ceremony of Kinsagenda, the master's guidance. They mended the bowl, not to hide the crack, but to fill it with gold. The ancient art of Kinsaji, repairing what is broken, not to disguise, but to illuminate. Each seam painted with warmth, each fracture a path of light. Tets. You watched, breathless, as the bowl transformed not back into what it was, but into something more honest, more beautiful. The master's teaching, you thought your worth was in being unbroken, Master Duan said softly. But even the Buddha held scars. Your bowl is not ruined, it is revealed. Just like you. Tetsu felt his eyes burn. No punishment, no exile, only kindness. The gold shimmered in the morning light. The parable of the cracked mirror. A young monk once broke a mirror and wept, believing he had destroyed his reflection. The master said, "No, you have freed it. Zen Konin, Zen wholeness is not flawlessness. It is integration. To be whole is not to be untouched, but to hold your cracks with grace. To say this, too, is me. To let light enter through the places we tried to hide, the Buddha and the broken self like a broken gong. Let one be silent, not retaliating. One is near to Nibbana." Verse 1-3 for the Buddha taught that brokenness is not the end. It is the beginning of silence, of humility, of awakening when we no longer resist our fallibility. Compassion arises, not just for others, but for the frightened child within. Modern psychology, shame and repairing trauma psychology, the feeling Tetsu carried is called toxic shame, the belief that a mistake makes us bad, unworthy of belonging. It freezes the body, silences the voice, isolates the soul. But healing begins when someone sees our brokenness, and stays when the wound is not met with exile, but inclusion. This is what Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard, and in Zen it is called compassionate presence. Tetsu's returned from that day on. Tetsu carried his bowl with reverence, not because it was flawless, but because it bore the truth of his becoming. Other monks began to notice. One by one, they brought forward their chipped bowls, cracks hidden for years. Together, they mended them, gold lines weaving a silent brotherhood, a monastery of radiant floors, an invitation to your own cracks. Perhaps you, too, carry a break, a secret shame, a moment you believe disqualifies you from love. I invite you now, close your eyes, picture that wound, that memory, that voice inside that says, "I ruined it." Now breathe. Imagine someone kneeling beside They take your hand and gently fill the crack with gold, not to erase, but to honor. You are not ruined. You are returning. Final whisper, the light through what was broken. Let the bowl in your heart be touched by gold. Let the thing you thought disqualified you become your deepest invitation to love. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real, to break, to feel, to heal, and then to shine. Story 9. Sleeping in the rain. Background, slow drizzle, the rhythmic tapping of rain on a wooden roof. Occasional distant thunder blending into wind chimes. She ran through fields that once held summer, now soft with rain. Shoes soaked, hair clinging to her face, a backpack bouncing behind her like a heartbeat, trying to leave. She didn't know where the road led, only that it went away. Away from the shouting, away from the silence, away from a house with lights on but no warmth. Her name was Nari, and she had nowhere else to be. The rain begins. It wasn't supposed to rain that night. The forecast said clear skies, but clouds don't read forecasts. The drizzle came soft at first, then heavier, then insistent. By the time Nari saw the wooden gate through the trees, she could barely see. A small sign read, Cedar Hermitage, visitors welcome. She didn't knock. She simply stepped inside the courtyard, shoes squeaking, breath uneven. There was a covered porch with old cushions. She curled into one, hugged her knees, shivered. The rain did not stop. But for now, she did. The monk appears. She didn't notice the man watching her from behind the screen. Older, barefoot, eyes like dusk, tired but wide. He stepped outside quietly, placing a folded robe on the bench beside her. Not warm, he said softly, but dry. She turned her face away, ashamed. I'm not staying, she muttered. He nodded. Then let the rain rest with you a while. She said nothing, but she took the robe. The silence between them, they sat in quiet for what felt like hours. No questions, no demands, only the sound of rain on wood. She looked sideways at him once. He was simply breathing. No judgment, just being. It felt foreign and safe, like when she was very small and someone brushed her hair behind her ear without a word. The parable of the dry place. The monk spoke at last. A long time ago, a girl ran through a storm, like you. She passed many houses. Some called out, but she kept going. She wanted no answers, only a way. At last, she found a small hut with a roof that didn't leak. She sat beneath it, shivering. The monk who lived there said nothing. He simply brought her tea. She drank, slept, woke with less ache. She never told him why she ran. She never needed to. Nari looked at him. Was that you? He smiled faintly. No, but I've been the roof. The breaking point. Her tears came without drama. Not loud, not performative, just wet and steady, like the rain. I didn't plan to come here, she whispered. I know, he said. I just couldn't stay. I thought I had to keep holding it in, that if I let go, I'd fall apart. The monk poured her tea from a thermos he'd brought out quietly. You did fall apart, he said gently. She nodded and drank. Buddhist insight, refuge in the present, just. As a mountain is unmoved by the wind, so too is the wise by blame or praise. Dhammapada, verse 8:1 in Buddhism. Refuge is not a place, it is a practice. We seek refuge in the Buddha, our capacity for awakening, the Dharma, the way things are, the Sangha, those who accompany us, but deeper still, we seek refuge in the present, because it is the only place the storm cannot follow. The past is pain, the future is fear. But now is where the breath is, where the body is, where peace begins. Modern psychology, flight and safety in trauma therapy. We recognize emotional flight, the compulsion to run when emotions overwhelm. When a child feels unsafe, unheard, or unloved, the nervous system learns to flee, not always physically, sometimes into perfectionism, into silence, into overthinking. But true healing begins not when someone tells us to calm down, but when someone sits with us in the rain, without fixing, without judging, just being, like the monk, like the porch, like presence. The sleep that night. Nari fell asleep for the first time in many nights, not because the world changed, but because she wasn't alone in it. The rain kept falling. But now, it was music. She dreamt of a house that didn't have to be fled. She dreamt of a roof that held the storm. The morning light had dawn. The rain had stopped. Mist rose from the trees like breath from warm tea. Nari woke slowly. The monk was sweeping leaves. She walked to him, folded the robe, and bowed. "Thank you," she said. He paused, looked at her with those dusk-soft eyes. "Remember," he said, "you don't have to keep running. Sometimes it's enough to stop where the rain stops." A practice, finding refuge where you are, wherever you are now. Perhaps there is a storm inside you, a place where you're still running, a memory, a weight, a silence too loud. Pause, close your eyes. Imagine a small porch, rain falling softly around it. You are wrapped in a dry robe. No one is asking anything of you. You don't need to fix the storm. You only need to breathe. Now whisper inwardly, "I am here. I am allowed to rest. This moment holds me." Let that be your shelter. Let that be enough. Final whisper, the roof that doesn't ask you. Don't need to explain everything to be worthy of comfort. You don't need to carry everything to be strong. You don't need to run forever to be safe. Sometimes the healing begins when you finally sit, when someone says nothing and means everything, when the rain falls around you and you realize it's okay to sleep, it's okay to be held, it's okay to come home. Story 10. The Candle in the Cave. Background: hollow wind blowing through rock, slow drip of water echoing, faint match strike, the flicker of a flame. He had once chased the stars. They called him Rakutha, trader, the builder, the man who always had a map. His days were full of schedules, his hands never idle. He spoke 5 languages, built 2 houses, climbed 7 mountains. He believed stillness was for the weak. He believed speed was strength, until the night he got lost in the cave. The arrival he hadn't planned to stop. He had been hiking, searching for a shortcut over the ridge before the monsoon season hit. The clouds arrived sooner than expected. Thunder rolled like drums behind the mountains. He found shelter in a narrow opening in the cliffside. Cave barely wide enough to squeeze through, but inside it opened up, wider, deeper, safe, he thought. He lit a match, then a small candle from his pack. He leaned against the wall, listening to the storm outside. And then the wind shifted, the rain poured, the entrance flooded, and the light went out. The darkness, the silence was so thick, it rang. His breath echoed back at him. His hands shook as he lit another match. But he was alone. No path, no exit, only the drip of water, the cold stone, and a mind full of noise. The panic within, he shouted, "No." Reply. He banged a rock against the wall. Nothing. He tried to map the space in his mind, but panic does not draw straight lines. His mind raced. I should have turned back. I should have watched the sky. I should have. His own thoughts suffocated him. He sat down, spine against stone, and whispered, "Help." But no one came. Only the silence replied. The candle hours passed. Or was it days? Time lost shape. At some point, hands shaking, he found one last match. He struck it, lit the small candle. The flame flickered in the still air, no taller than a thumbnail, but in that light, the darkness changed. The parable of the blind cave. A man, blind since birth, lived in a cave. He believed the world was black. One day, someone placed a single candle before him. He could not see it, but he felt its warmth. And he wept, for he had never known that even warmth had a shape. Zen Koenraku stared at the candle. He realized the cave was not his enemy. The darkness was not a punishment. It was an invitation to see what he had forgotten, the memory in the stillness. Something softened. He remembered a time he had been quiet, not out of despair, but of peace. A childhood morning on a porch, his grandmother humming, the smell of porridge, the light catching dust in the air. A time when he didn't need to go anywhere, when breath was enough. He wept not because he was afraid, but because he had forgotten that life is not something to win, it is something to receive. Like warmth, like silence, like a flame in the dark. Buddhist insight. Darkness as teacher. From darkness arises light. From confusion, clarity. From stillness, liberation. Udanyona Bardan Sen. The Buddha taught that darkness is not inherently bad. It is fertile ground. It is the womb of insight in Zen. The dark night is not to be avoided, is to be sat with, entered, felt, not to escape, but to remember the light we forgot we had. Modern psychology, the threshold, moment in therapy. We speak of the dark night, of the solar psychological space, where the ego dissolves, where old identities collapse. It often comes after burnout, after loss, after everything that once made sense no longer does. We think we are broken, but in truth, we are being remade, and the path out is not to push harder, but to light a single candle of presence, of breath, of grace. The return when the rain stopped. Light returned to the cave's entrance. Raku gathered his things, but before he left, he placed the candle on a small ledge of stone, still burning, a gift for the next wanderer. He stepped out into the light, not as a man racing against time, but as one walking with it. Each step slow, alive. Practice finding your candle wherever you are. Now, perhaps you are in your own cave, a season of confusion, of loss, of silence that feels too loud. I invite you to breathe and imagine a small flame before you. It does not shout, it does not promise, it simply is, and as you watch it, feel your breath return, feel your fear soften. Say inwardly, I am not lost, I am only in the quiet, and this light is enough. Let that be your way back. Final whisper, the light you carry, you do not need a fire to begin again. You only need a flame. You do not need to know the way. You only need to trust the step. The candle in the cave is not separate from you. It is you. It is your presence, your stillness, your return. So, if tonight feels dark, sit, wait, and when you're ready, light the smallest match. It will find you and lead you home. Story 11. The Fisherman Who Let Go. Background, slow lapping of water against a dock. seagulls distant, a bamboo rod creaking in the wind. He rose before the sun. The boat was ready, lines coiled, nets folded, bait packed. Every morning was the same dot. Every morning was the hunt. The ocean stretched wide and silent. It had given him much and taken just as much. His name was Daki, and he was tired. But he wouldn't say that out loud. The one that never came for years. Daki had pursued one thing, a fish so large, so elusive, that it had become legend on the docks. Locals called it ginkgo, the silver whisper. They said it shimmered like moonlight and moved like a ghost. He had once glimpsed it, years ago, breaking the surface just before dusk. Since then, it had become more than a catch. It had become a purpose. "I'll stop when I get it," he'd said. But now, his hands ached. His eyes burned. His nets were heavier than his shoulders. Still, he kept casting. The old monk at the pier one foggy morning. As Daki tied a knot near the harbour, he noticed a man sitting at the far end of the pier dot. No rod, no bait, just a bamboo hat, bare feet. A smile like winter sunlight. The monk, every few months. He appeared, never fishing, never speaking unless spoken to. That morning, Daki walked over. "You don't fish," he said flatly. The monk nodded. "No need. Then why come here?" "To listen," the monk replied, cupping a hand to the sea. "She speaks, if you don't interrupt." Daki scoffed. "I'm not here to listen. I'm here to catch." The day of no catch that day, he caught nothing, not a nibble, not a pull. Hours passed. The sun climbed and fell. The sea sparkled, but gave nothing. At dusk, his lines floated limp. Frustrated, he stood to reel in, then paused. He stared into the water, the ripples, the light, the silence. He didn't know why, but he dropped the rod, just let it go. It sank slowly, like a promise released. The letting go, he sat down, bare hands on his knees. The boat drifted, for the first time in years. He didn't try, didn't hunt, didn't hope, didn't measure the moment by what he got. He just breathed, and that's when it happened. A shadow, below dock broad, silver dot, it circled the boat once, then disappeared. He didn't move, didn't reach, just smiled, not because he had caught it, but because it had come. The parable of the empty hook. A student asked, "Master, why do you leave your hook without bait?" The master replied, "So that only the fish who seek nothing will find me." Zen Konzen does not chase. Zen invites. When we release the tight grip of striving, space opens, and in that space, something deeper enters. Not always what we expect, but always what we need. The Buddha on clinging. Just as a tree clings to the earth, so too does the grasping mind cling to suffering. Samyutta Nick, Yamio 250. Dois clinging tanis, thirst that does not quench. We believe, if I catch this, I'll be enough. But the mind that clings does not hold peace. Only pressure, only fear. The sea does not belong to the net, and love does not belong to possession. Freedom is not in the having, it is in the letting go. Modern psychology, the surrender response in trauma-informed therapy. We explore surrender not as giving up, but as giving over. Letting go of the illusion of control, the pressure to produce the identity tied to outcomes. We find that safety is not always in holding tighter. Sometimes it is in opening the hands and saying, if this comes, it comes. If it leaves, I remain. The morning after the next day, Daki didn't take the boat out. He sat on the dock, watched the tide. The monk returned, barefoot. Daik. I looked over, smiled. No rod today. The monk asked. No need, Daiki replied. The monk bowed, so did the sea. A practice releasing the hook now, wherever you are. Maybe you've been chasing something. Love, validation, resolution, and maybe the chase has become the cage. I invite you now to close your eyes. Picture yourself in a boat. Your hands hold a fishing rod. Feel the tension, the grip. Now gently, let it go, let the rod fall. Watch the ripples fade, and say, inwardly, I do not need to catch it to be whole. I do not need to possess it to be touched. I trust the tide. Breathe, and let peace rise like the silver. Fish, final whisper. The catch in the not catching. What if the thing you're trying to catch is only waiting for you to stop? What if the sea loves open hands? What if surrender is not losing, but returning to breath, to stillness, to the self beneath striving? The fisherman who lets go does not leave empty, he leaves full of what cannot be measured, presence. Peace. The gentle joy of not needing more. Story 12. The woman who couldn't forgive herself. Background, slow wind through pine trees, sound of temple bell echoing distantly, soft footsteps on gravel. She arrived just before dusk. Eyes downcast, shoulders heavy, a thin scarf wrapped around her face like a veil of apology. Her name was Hannah. She had walked for miles, not for enlightenment, not for answers, but for silence. She thought, if she could just disappear for a while, the guilt might not follow. She was wrong, it always followed. The arrival at Still Waters. The nunnery was called Still Waters. It sat beside a quiet lake where no one fished, and the wind made music through reeds. When Hannah knocked, no one answered, so she waited. Hours passed. The sky turned violet, then a creak. The wooden door opened. A nun stood inside. Older, quiet. She did not speak, just bowed and stepped aside. A room and a bowl. Hannah was given a small room, a rice bowl and a robe to borrow. The days were simple, sweeping, cooking, listening to the bell. The silence was not cold, was kind, but inside Hannah, the storm still raged. Every time she looked at the lake, she saw her reflection and turned away. She was not running from others, she was running from herself. The guilt no one asked her story, but if they had, she would have said, I failed. I hurt someone I loved. I made a choice I cannot undo. She didn't need punishment. She had been punishing herself for years. She needed something. She didn't believe she deserved forgiveness. The gentle nun one morning, as Hannah was sweeping leaves near the garden, the old nun approached. She sat on the steps, sipping tea. Finally, she spoke. Your hands are gentle, but your heart is not. Hannah paused, swallowed hard. I don't deserve gentleness, she said. The nun nodded. That's why you need it most. The parable of the inked cloth. A monk spilled ink on a white robe. He wept, believing it ruined. The master said, then wear the robe until the stain becomes the center of the pattern. Zen nun looked at Hannah's face. Tell me, she said, what would you say to a child who made a mistake? Hannah hesitated. I'd hold her, tell her it's okay, that she didn't mean to. And what do you say to yourself? Nothing, Hannah whispered. I just stay angry. The nun nodded. Then you must become the one who holds you. The Buddhist path of self-forgiveness. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but by love. This is the eternal law. Dhammapada, verse 5 in Buddhist practice. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about releasing the fire we carry, especially when that fire is turned inward. Forgiving ourselves is an act of compassion, an acknowledgement that the self, too, is impermanent. The mistake, too, is impermanent, and the suffering can become the path. Modern psychology, shame versus remorse in psychology. There is a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. Healing begins when we untangle the two, when we stop defining ourselves by our worst moment, when we understand remorse is healthy, self-attack is not. Change grows not from punishment, but from presence, and forgiveness is not a verdict, it's a direction. The mirror and the lake. The nun brought Hannah to the lake at dawn. The surface was still. Fog hovered like breath. She handed Hannah a mirror. Look. Hannah hesitated, then raised it. She saw tired eyes, worn skin, a face that looked older than its years, but not evil, not monstrous, just human, just hurting. The nun spoke gently. Can you say, even softly, I forgive you? Hannah's lip trembled. She closed her eyes and whispered, I forgive you, she cried. Not like thunder, like rain. Soft, cleansing, the flower offering before she left. Hannah placed a single lotus at the altar. She bowed deeply. The nun handed her a slip of paper. Written on it were 5 words. Come back to yourself, gently. Hannah smiled through her tears and walked not away, but home. A practice. Forgiving the self, now wherever you are. Perhaps there is something you've carried, a mistake, a regret, a silence you wish you had broken. Close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, breathe, feel the rhythm of life that has never stopped beating for you, and say, slowly, I see the hurt I caused, I hold myself accountable, and I choose to forgive myself. Gently, patiently, again and again. Let that be your mantra. Let that be your healing. Final whisper, the mercy you deserve you. Do not need to prove your worth to be forgiven. You do not need to fix the past to find peace. You only need to open the door inward and sit beside the part of you that still weeps. Hold her, speak gently. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the courage to return to yourself with mercy, with breath, with grace. Story 13. The Gate Without a Door. Background, light wind across temple stones. The sound of a foot gently knocking on wood, but no echo. He had walked for weeks through forest, valley, river bend, over stone bridges and through markets. Humming with life, he was told that if he reached the temple beyond the hills, he would find what he sought: peace, clarity, awakening. His name was Renji, and he had one wish: let me in. The arrival at the gate, it stood tall, wrapped in ivy, 2 wooden pillars, aged but strong, a gate carved with dragons and clouds, but there was no door, no hinge, no hinge. No latch. Just an opening. He paused, looked around. Nothing marked the path. No one greeted him. The temple lay just beyond, serene, silent, but something inside him froze. He could not step through the invisible wall. He circled the gate, pushed at the empty air, stepped close, then back. Each time he tried to pass, a feeling stopped him, like walking into a thick fog of doubt. His chest tightened, his legs locked. I came all this way, he whispered. Why can't I cross? A monk sweeping the courtyard noticed him, walked over. Are you lost? She asked. I can't get through. She looked at the open gate, then at him. There is no door, she said. Exactly, he snapped. So why do I feel blocked? The monk smiled faintly. Because the door is not in the wood. The cone of the doorless gate, a monk stood before an open gate and begged to be let in. The master said, then drop what you're carrying. The monk said, I have nothing. The master replied, then drop yourself. Zen Koanth monk gestured for Renji to sit. They sat in silence. Why did you come? She asked. He answered without hesitation. I'm tired of being confused. Tired of chasing answers. I want peace. I want truth. She nodded. And who is the one who wants that? He opened his mouth, paused. I don't know. The searcher who blocks the search. The monk pointed to the gate. It doesn't block you. You do. Your seeking is the wall. Yourself is the door. Renji frowned. But if I stop seeking, how will I find? She replied, by being. Being what? Being here. The mirror gate sheet led him to a small pool beside the entrance. Still. Clear look, she said. He knelt, saw his face, then saw more. The tightness in his jaw, the storm behind his eyes, the weight of all he thought he needed to be. She whispered, You believe peace is over there, but the gate only opens when you stop being the one who needs to cross. Buddhist insight. No self and the way in when I let go of what I am. I become what I might be. When I stop running, I arrive. Attributed to the Buddha in Buddhism, the concept of anat non-self is not the erasure of identity, but the release of fixation. The mind clings. I must awaken. But in clinging, it separates itself from what already is. You are not outside the truth. You are inside it, always. The only barrier is believing you are not. Modern psychology, the inner gate, internal family systems, therapy, IFS, we speak of protective parts, mental patterns built to keep us safe. They whisper, you're not ready. You don't belong. You must earn peace. These voices become inner gates. But the door is not real. It is a story, and stories can be softened with presence, with breath, with love. Renji's choice, the monk stood beside him. You can step through any time, she said. He looked at the gate again. This time, not with striving, not with demand. He simply breathed, felt his feet, felt the wind, and stepped forward. Nothing stopped him, no thunder, no light, only silence. And in that silence, everything opened. A practice, passing through the inner gate close. Your eyes, imagine a beautiful gate before you. Tall, ornate, but without a door. You stand before it. Something tightens in you, fear, doubt, shame. Now breathe. Say inwardly, there is no door. There is no barrier. The only thing between me and peace is the idea that I'm not allowed. Now, step through with softness, with faith, with love. Final whisper. You are always inside the great mistake is thinking we are on the outside of the sacred, but you were never outside. You only needed to pause to see that the gate was already open, that the temple was your breath, that the peace was waiting inside you, not behind a door, but beneath the self who asked for one. Step through, you are already home. Story 14. The tree that waited 1,000 years. Background, soft rustling of leaves, bird songs scattered like morning bells, a breeze shifting slowly through an old garden. In the northern courtyard of Junrin Temple stood a tree, old, bare, silent. Its bark was weathered like cracked hands. Its limbs reached out like questions that had never been answered. No leaves, no fruit, no blossoms, just presence. It had been there longer than the temple itself, and it had never bloomed. The monks whisper, some said the tree was cursed. Others said it was asleep once. Many years ago, an emperor's gardener had visited. He examined the roots, the soil, the shape of the trunk. Then he bowed and said, "Do not cut it down, something is listening," and he left. Since then, no one touched it. They swept around it. They bowed to it out of respect, but they never expected anything more until the child came. The child, named Emish, was no older than 8. Eyes like dew, quiet steps like feathers. Her mother had died the year before. Her father, a traveling trader, had left her at the temple while he sailed west. "She'll be safe with the monks," he said. And she was, but safe is not always the same as whole. She spoke little, ate slowly, slept near the kitchen stove for warmth. The monks watched her with soft concern, and every morning she went to the tree. The ritual of silence, she brought it offerings, a pebble, a feather, a drawing. She bowed 3 times, then sat, cross-legged beside it, and spoke not, loudly, not to be heard, but because something inside her knew it mattered. She told the tree about her mother's lullabies, about how some nights she still waited for the door to open, about how sometimes she didn't want to speak, because it made her miss her mother more. The tree never replied, but it never turned away. The seasonless tree winter passed. Then spring, the other trees in the temple garden blossomed. The cherry trees burst pink and white. Even the smallest shrubs bloomed, but the old tree remained bare. Some monks shook their heads. "It has no heartwood," one said. "It is empty inside." But EMI sat with it every day, and one morning she did something different. She pressed her forehead to the bark and whispered, "It's okay if you never bloom." Then she smiled and walked away. The first flower that night. Clouds came low over the temple. Rain whispered through the thatch. By morning, the courtyard was washed clean, and on the branch above, where EMI had sat, a single blossom had opened, small, pale, unshaped, but real. The awakening, no one understood it. The monks gathered, stared, whispered, "It must be an accident," one said, "or a trick of the season," another added, but it was not a trick. By the end of the week, 5 blossoms had appeared. By the end of the month, there were 20. The tree that had waited 1,000 years was waking, and it bloomed not from command, but from being loved as it was. The parable of the hidden roots. A traveler asked why the tree did not bloom. The master replied, "Because no one had loved its roots yet." Zen growth does not always respond to pressure. Sometimes it answers presence, the kind that doesn't demand results, the kind that waits, silently, the kind that whispers, "You don't need to change for me to stay." The tree had not lacked soil. It had lacked softness, and softness, given without agenda, becomes water. The Buddha on patience, as rain pierces the stone, so too does patient presence pierce the hardened heart. Dhammapada, verse 121, the Buddha spoke of very effort, not as striving, but as gentle constancy. We cannot force a seed to sprout, but we can stay near it, water it, let the sun touch it, and trust that life moves beneath the surface, even when we see nothing. Modern psychology, attachment and safe space in trauma-informed psychology. We speak of earned safety when someone has been frozen by loss, fear, neglect. They don't need fixing. They need someone who stays, who doesn't flinch. Who doesn't rush. This presence creates earned, secure attachment, a healing of relational wounds through consistent, gentle connection, like Emmy's with the tree, like yours, perhaps, with a part of yourself you've long called barren. Emmy's last visit the day her father returned. She packed her small bag. Before leaving, she sat beneath the blooming tree. She didn't cry. She didn't beg it to remember her. She just placed a small note in a crack of the bark and bowed 3 times, then walked away. What did the note say? Years later, a storm cracked one of the lower limbs. Inside, monks found the faded slip of paper. It read, "Thank you for staying, even when you looked empty. And beneath that, you helped me grow again." A practice, sitting with the barren tree. Close your eyes. Picture a tree in a quiet garden. It does not bloom, it does not speak. It is part of you. A place you've long believed was lifeless. Sit beside it, not to fix, not to demand, but to be. Now say inwardly, you don't need to change. I am with you anyway. Breathe. Let the roots feel you. Let the unseen begin. Final. Whisper, the blossom that waited not. All trees bloom when you expect. Not all healing comes with noise. Some awakenings happen in silence, in shadow, in the tender waiting of a child's faith. So, be patient with what seems lifeless in you. It may not be barren. It may just be listening and waiting for you. Story 15. The monk who never answered. Background: cicadas in afternoon heat, slow rustling of wind through tall grass, distant chime of a temple bell, then quiet. He had questions, not one, not two, but dozens. Cato was known in his monastery as the seeker. Even as a child, he questioned everything. What is truth? What is self? Why do I suffer? He read every sutra, memorized every teaching, practiced every technique, but still his heart ached. So he was sent to the mountain, to the monk who never answers. The abbot said, Kaito, laughed. But how will I learn? The abbot smiled. Exactly. The journey up the mountain was steep and covered in mist. Each step felt like walking through a forgotten dream. He reached the hermitage at twilight. It was barely a shelter, just stone, moss, and silence. The monk sat by a cold fire pit, old, motionless, eyes open but soft. Cato bowed deeply. I've come with questions, he said. The monk said nothing. Cato tried again. I wish to understand why the mind suffers, why impermanence hurts, why silence feels so loud. The monk gazed at him, then pointed to a stone bench, and returned to stillness. The days without Answascato stayed. 1 day, then 2, then a week. Each morning, he asked a question. Each day, the monk sat with him, never speaking, never frowning, just breathing, just listening. At first, Cato burned with frustration. What kind of teacher are you? He muttered on the 5th day. The monk didn't blink, only turned his face slightly toward the trees, and Cato fell silent. The first shift had happened one morning, just before dawn. Cato awoke in the chill. The monk was already seated. As always, Cato opened his mouth, then paused, and for the first time, he said nothing. They sat, birds began to sing, mist rolled down the valley, and Cato felt something strange, his chest no longer reaching. His questions still existed, but they no longer clawed, They floated like leaves, and in that silence he felt full. The parable of the silent bell, a student cried, "Why won't you speak?" The master lit incense, placed it between them, and said nothing. The student wept, not because he was unanswered, but because he was heard. Zen Consum teachings do not live in words. They live in space, in presence, in breath shared between beings. The greatest answers are not always spoken. They are remembered when the mind is quiet enough to hear what has always been there. The Buddha on noble silence, when one knows, and knows they know, yet speaks not, this is the highest speech. Sutta Nipi. Da 45. The Buddha himself often answered with silence, not to avoid, but to point beyond language, beyond opinion, beyond concept. Zen calls this direct transmission beyond words and letters. The truth that cannot be taught can be embodied. Modern psychology, the presence beyond fixing in, modern therapy. Silence is sometimes the most powerful intervention. Carl Rogers called it unconditional positive regard. The client speaks, the therapist does not interrupt, and in that space, healing occurs, not because advice is given, but because someone stays, someone sees, as the monk did. Cato's last question one evening. Cato sat beside the monk, watching the sunset melt into the earth. "I have one last question," he whispered. Still, the monk said nothing. Cato smiled, "I know." And he wept not in sorrow, but in release, in understanding that not all questions are meant to be answered. Some are meant to be held, like prayer bowls catching rain. The departure at dawn. Cato bowed. The monk returned the gesture, eyes shining. With the softness of 1,000 unsaid things, Cato walked down the mountain slowly. No enlightenment, no philosophy, only silence and peace. A practice, sitting with the question wherever you are now. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, picture a monk sitting before you. You open your mouth to speak a question, but he places a gentle hand on your heart. No words, just presence. Now, inhale and sit. Don't fix, don't analyze. Just let the question exist, untouched, respected, loved, final. Whisper, the answer that doesn't speak not. All truths are loud. Some arrive in stillness, in the hush between. Thoughts in the gaze that doesn't judge. You do not always need the answer. Sometimes you only need space to rest, to breathe, to know that your question is allowed to be, and that is its own kind of answer. Story 16. The river that forgot to flow. Background, the hush of a slow stream. Wind brushing reeds, an occasional droplet falling. Then stillness. It had once been a river. A long time ago, they said. It ran clear and swift, cutting through valleys, feeding rice fields, singing under moonlight. But now, it was still. Barely a trickle moved through its bed. Algae clouded its surface. Stones baked in silence. Even frogs, once common, had stopped returning. Some called it the sleeping river, others called it dead. But the old villagers knew better. They said it was grieving. The girl, named Sora, came to the river every morning. She was 12, quiet, thin as a reed. Her brother had drowned in the river 3 years before. Since then, she had not stepped in, not even once. She came only to sit, to draw lines in the dust, to trace ripples that never came. The villagers whispered she shouldn't be here. But she didn't listen, because something in her believed. The river was waiting to dot. The dry voice one afternoon as the heat grew heavy, she heard a sound, not loud, not words, but a presence. It came from the middle of the riverbed, a place where the current once danced. She stepped closer, and she felt it, a longing, like the air between sobs, like the silence after a goodbye. Not hers, the river's, the monk. Beside the shore, she didn't know when he arrived. The man in grey robes, sitting beneath the weeping willow by the bank. He said nothing, just placed a wooden bowl in the dirt beside him, and waited. Sora approached. "Are you here for the river too?" she asked. He nodded. "But you're not trying to fix it?" "No," he said. "I'm listening." She frowned. "To what?" "To what it hasn't said yet." The river's dream. For days they sat together. No rituals, no chants, just presence. Sora sometimes brought offerings, a smooth stone, a shell. A song hummed beneath her breath. She never stepped into the water, until one day rain came, not a storm, just a gentle, steady fall that softened the world. Sora stood barefoot by the edge, and then, slowly, she walked in, not deep, just enough to feel the chill. She placed both hands on the surface and whispered, "I'm sorry. I blamed you." The first movement that night, a stream of water trickled around a buried stone. The next day, it curved around another dot. By week's end, a thread of current wove through the center. By month's end, frogs returned, and the river, once still, began again, not like before, not roaring, but breathing. The parable of the stuck flow. A man tried to unclog a spring by kicking at the rocks. The water didn't move. A child came, sat beside it, and cried. The tears softened the mud, and the water returned. Zen Kontha are wounds that do not respond to force. There are currents in us, dammed not by stone, but by unwept grief. To restore them is not to break, it is to sit, to listen, to let warmth touch what coldness hid. Buddhist insight, the path of softening. As the dew softens the blade, so too does compassion dissolve the obstruction of the heart. Dhammapada, verse 223. The Buddha did not only teach about overcoming, he taught about softening, allowing the river of life, of breath, of feeling to resume without clinging. Zen calls this Mushanda, no mind, that flows like water, unresisting, unforced. The river didn't need fixing, it needed witnessing. So did Sora, so do we. Modern psychology. Emotional stagnation and grief in psychology. Emotional stagnation often arises from frozen grief, a loss too big to hold, a guilt too deep to name. Instead of processing, we freeze, we become dry, we stop moving, we become the river that forgets to flow. But healing returns when presence returns, when someone sits beside us and says, "I'm here. You don't have to move yet, but I won't leave." The nervous system, like water, remembers, and slowly it begins again. Sora's final visit, she came one dawn with a single white flower. The monk had gone, only the bowl remained. She placed the flower in it. Let it float. The water now flowed beneath her feet. She stepped in and laughed, not because she forgot, but because she remembered. Differently, not pain, but presence. A practice, restoring the flow wherever you are now. Perhaps there is a part of you that feels stuck, not broken, not wrong, just unmoving. Close your eyes, picture a river dot, still quiet. You sit beside it, say softly, "You don't have to rush, you don't have to roar, I will wait with you. Now breathe, and let the first ripple form, no need to force. Just listen, it will come, final. Whisper, the stream beneath the silence, what looks lifeless is not always dead. What feels stuck may simply be resting, waiting for rain, waiting for your hand, waiting for softness. You are the river, you are the child, you are the presence that brings motion back. So be patient, sit long, and when it begins to move, don't be afraid, let yourself flow. Story 17. The bird that sang in the fog. Background, thick morning fog. Single birdsong piercing silence. Then mist, swallowing sound. The village of Nenku sat in a valley where fog visited often. It wasn't harsh, just persistent. Each dawn, it crept like a white river between homes, hiding rooftops, dissolving trees, silencing steps in the fog. People spoke softly, walked slowly, waited. Children joked that even the sun forgot the village. But one thing remained constant. Each morning, before anyone opened their doors, they heard birds singing, somewhere unseen. The sound before light, it wasn't loud, nor complex, but it was clear. 3 notes, then pause. 2 more, then silence. It came from the east slope, they believed, from the old cedars that held the first touch of day. That the villagers never saw the bird, never found its nest, yet every morning rain or frost it sang. One elder called it the soul of the valley. Most simply said, it reminds me the day has come. The girl named Aya, she was 10. Her parents were weavers. Her voice too quiet for school, but she listened every morning. Aya would rise before her mother's loom, before her father's tea kettle, and open the shutters, fog and the bird. One day she asked her father, "Why does it sing when no one can see it?" He smiled, "Because it doesn't sing to be seen." "But doesn't it get lonely?" "Perhaps," he said, "but maybe it knows. The song matters anyway." The monk and the bell that spring. A traveling monk came through. He stayed 3 nights. Each dawn, he sat in the temple yard, facing east, listening. On the 4th day, he asked Aya, "Have you heard the bird?" She nodded, double quotes, "Do you know why it sings?" She shrugged. The monk smiled. "May I tell you a story? The parable of the hidden bell. There was once a bell buried beneath a mountain temple. It was struck long ago in a ceremony now forgotten. But in moments of stillness, people could still feel its echo, though no one had touched it in years. A child asked, "Why does the bell still sound?" The master replied, "Because something once rang in truth, and truth does not vanish." Zen monk looked at Aya. Sometimes we do things not because we are seen, but because we are aligned with nature, with spirit, with truth. The question of purpose. Aya thought for a while. Then, if the bird stops, would we miss it? The monk's eyes softened. Yes, though we may not know what's missing. He placed a stone in her palm. "This is your listening." She kept it by her window. The summer storm, that summer, a storm came from the east. Fierce winds, trees split, roofs lifted when the rain cleared, silence remained, and for the first time in years, the bird did not sing. The villagers noticed. Something felt wrong, empty. They walked the woods. Aya climbed the slope, calling softly, no reply. Days passed, fog returned, but the song did not. The grief of the invisible Aya sat by her shutters and wept. She had never seen the bird, never touched it, but now she felt its absence like a friend lost. She held the stone the monk had given her, and whispered, "You mattered." Then she sang 3 notes. Pause. 2 more. The melody was fragile, but real. She sang it every morning. The return one morning. As the fog drifted thinner, Aya opened her shutters, listened, and heard it. 3 notes. Pause. 2 more, from farther east. A younger voice, new, different, but familiar. The song had returned, passed on, not because of praise, but because someone remembered. Buddhist insight, selfless offering the fragrance of virtue, travels against the wind. The good person's presence is felt unseen. Dhammapada, verse 54. The Buddha taught about DNA, the practice of giving without expectation. In Zen, this becomes presence without performance, to offer beauty, truth, or kindness, not for validation, but because it is your nature. The bird sang not to be admired. It sang because the morning called for song. Modern psychology, meaning beyond recognition. In modern therapy, people often struggle with feeling unseen. We equate visibility with worth, but healing comes when we reconnect with intrinsic value, internal compass, quiet, purpose to write, teach, love, or sing, even if no one notices. Because we notice, because we live, and life sings through us. The practice of the hidden song. Close your eyes. Picture a quiet morning, the world wrapped in fog. You cannot see far, but inside you, a song wants to rise. Not grand, just true. 3 notes. Pause. 2 more. Now say inwardly, I offer this moment. I need no witness. My presence is enough. Let the song rise, then fall, then rest. Final whisper, sing. Even in the fog, there will be times when no one sees you. No applause, no spotlight, still sing. There will be days when your light feels small. Still shine. You are not made for performance. You are made for presence. And the morning still arrives, because someone, somewhere, sings through the fog. Story 18. The Old Man and the Clay Buddha. Background, rhythmic brushing sounds, soft humming in an empty hall, light wind stirring incense smoke. He had done it every morning for 40 years. He rose before dawn, boiled tea, swept the shrine floor, and then, with a cloth soft from use, he polished the clay Buddha. His hands trembled now with age, but the strokes remained steady, circular, devout. He spoke no mantra. He asked for nothing, only moved his hands. In reverence, the villagers called him Jikatha, quiet keeper. The shrine, it wasn't grand. A single-room hall tucked beneath cedar trees. Roof worn, steps uneven, but inside, the statue stood tall. A seated Buddha, eyes half closed, molded in local clay long before anyone remembered. Some said it was sacred, others said it was superstition, but none doubted Jiko's love for it. Why? Do you polish it? Once, a traveling merchant had stopped by the shrine. He watched Jiko polish the statue for nearly an hour before asking, "Why do you do this?" Jiko looked up, smiling gently. "Because it lets me remember." "Remember what?" He didn't answer, just dipped the cloth again. The rain and the cracked that summer. The rains came early, heavy, unrelenting. One morning, after a thunderstorm, Jiko opened the shrine and froze. The statue had cracked. A jagged split from crown to chest. Clay had crumbled onto the floor. He dropped to his knees, whispering apologies. Not to the gods, but to the silence, to the space he'd worshipped and wept. The young monk's visit word of the cracked statue reached the nearby monastery. A young monk came to assess. He examined the damage, then turned to Jiko. "This clay is fragile. It's not meant to last." Jiko nodded. "I know. Then why mourn?" Jiko didn't speak for a long time, then whispered, "Because I forgot it could break." The parable of the masked mirror. A man worshipped a mirror so long he forgot his own reflection. When it shattered, he wept not for the mirror, but for the self he had placed inside it. Zen monk sat beside him. "Perhaps it is time to ask what you've really been polishing." Jiko stared at the cracked face of the Buddha. "I thought I was keeping it sacred." "Maybe you were," the monk said. "Or maybe it was keeping you sacred." The revelation that night, Jiko lit incense as usual, but he did not polish, he simply sat. The crack now glowed in candlelight, and he saw something strange. The face, though broken, looked softer, more real, less symbol, more presence. It no longer asked to be honored. It invited him to be honest. The Buddha on form one, who sees me in form, or seeks me in sound, follows a false path. Diamond Sutra, the Buddha taught that form is not the truth, it is the raft. Useful, beautiful, but not the short. Jiko had not been wrong to care for the statue. But now he saw what he had missed, that the Buddha was not in the clay. The Buddha was in the polishing, in the attention, in the quiet love behind the hands. Modern psychology, sacred ritual and inner projection, in-depth psychology, we explore how rituals and objects hold our projections. We place hope into symbols, safety into routines, identity into roles. But when the object breaks, we're asked to return to the source, the feeling beneath the form, the love beneath the act, and in that return we often find we never needed the form to begin with, only the presence it evoked. Jiko's final offering, he did not repair the statue, he let it remain cracked. He stopped polishing, but he did not stop coming. Each morning he sat, brewed tea, swept the floor, but now he polished the silence. Visitors as pilgrims came, saw the cracked Buddha, asked, "Why has no one fixed it?" Jiko only smiled and said, "Because it is finished teaching. A practice honoring the broken form. Close your eyes. Picture something you once held sacred, a place, a person, a practice. Now see it cracked, not shattered, not gone, not just changed. Sit beside it, say inwardly, I see your edges, I release your image, I keep the love that shaped you. Breathe and bow. 2. What still lives? Within. Final whisper, the clay that cracks. Not all things are meant to last. Some are meant to be loved, then released. Some statues are built not to endure, but to teach you how to kneel. So when the form dissolves, don't mourn the loss. Remember the hands that moved in reverence, and know the Buddha never left. He only moved inside you. Story 19. The Dream of the Falling Leaf. Background, gentle rustle of leaves, slow breeze winding through autumn trees, the sound of something light drifting through air. It began with a tremble, a faint loosening at the stem, a soft sigh in the bark, a silence in the branch that once held tight, and then it let go. The leaf fell, not fast, not fearful, just falling. The dream begins. As it drifted, the wind caught it, lifted it, played with it, and in that moment, the leaf had a dream. It dreamt it was a cloud, expansive, white, unbound. It saw rivers below, mountains, villages it had never known. I am free, the leaf whispered in the dream. I am endless, but dreams are like wind, they pass, and soon. The leaf remembered it was falling. The descended downward. It floated, not like flight, but like surrender. The world blurred beneath it gold fields. A winding path, an old monk sitting by a stone. Then earth came near, and it landed quite the edge of a garden, on soil soft with time. The old monkey saw it land, gently picked it up between thumb and forefinger, held it to the light. You've come home, he whispered, then placed it beside a stone lantern, letting it rest among others. The parable of the wandering leaf. A leaf asked the wind, "Where am I going?" The wind replied, "Back to the root." The leaf said, "But I was meant to soar." The wind whispered, "And you did. Now you will become the sky you longed for." Zen monk watched the leaf for a long time, then closed his eyes and remembered. The past life of the leaflet had once been a bud curled, waiting. Then, one spring, it unfurled, greeted the sun, danced with rain, provided shade to beetles, rest to butterflies, and silence for those who needed it. It never asked to be seen. It only lived fully until the time came to let go. The Buddha on impermanence. All things conditioned are impermanent. They arise and pass away. To know this is to find peace. Dhammapada, verse 277. The Buddha taught that everything we call self is in motion. A momentary gathering of elements, like a flame, like a thought, like a leaf. To cling is to suffer. To release is to return, not to nothing, but to the great. Unfolding modern psychology, ego, death, and transformation, in-depth psychology. The ego often resists endings. It says, "This role is who I am. This relationship defines me. If I fall, I am lost." But the falling is not death, it is transition, the end of one form, and the beginning of return, to meaning, to integration, to life beyond identity. The monk's reflection. The monk told his students. Later that day, "See this leaf. It once thought it was only a leaf, but now it feeds the roots. It will rise again in spring, not as the same, not as separate, but as part." One student asked, "So nothing dies?" The monk smiled. "Things change. That is there. Way, the whisper of the soil. The leaf rested, became soft, became earth, joined the breath of worms, the cradle of seeds, and in time it returned as a bud, different, unaware of its past, but holding somehow. The memory of wind. A practice, letting the leaf fall. Close your eyes. Picture something you've held tightly, a role, a relationship, a belief. Now imagine it as a leaf. See it trembling at the stem, ready, not with fear, but with grace. Now say, inwardly, you may fall. I will let you go. You are not ending. You are returning. Breathe. Let it drift. Let yourself root deeper. Final whisper. The truth of falling. Falling is not failure. Letting go is not loss. It is the way of life, the path of the leaf, the dream of the cloud, the soft landing into wholeness. So when your time comes to release, do not resist. Remember, you are not leaving the tree. You are returning to the forest. Story 20. The hand that let the snake go. Background, insects buzzing in summer heat, dry leaves rustling, and the subtle hiss of something moving through grass. The village feared the path behind the temple. Snakes lived there, they said, long, silent, quick to strike. Children were told to avoid it, but one girl didn't. Her name was Kana. The girl who walked alone, Kana, was 12. With steady eyes and quiet feet, she often wandered the woods, collecting herbs for her grandmother's teas. She wasn't reckless, just listening to wind, to roots, to things others didn't hear. That's how she heard it that day. The sound of something struggling in the underbrush. The snake in the net it was caught. A snake green and gold, twisting violently in a discarded net of fishing line. Its eyes were wild with pain, its body bloody from thrashing. Kana approached slowly. It hissed, struck near her hand. She stepped back, then crouched. "I won't hurt you," she whispered, and began to untangle it. The bite she was careful, slow, but pain does not reason. And as her fingers pulled the final loop, the snake bit her deep. Quick, then, slithered away, disappearing into leaves. Kana fell to the ground, clutching her wrist. The choice her breath trembled. The bite throbbed poison, bloomed. She could have cursed, could have crushed it with a stone, could have shouted, "Ungrateful creature." But she in single quotes, she simply said, "I know you were afraid," and passed out. The healing the monks found her before nightfall, brought her to the temple. They treated the bite. It was shallow, not venomous, but the fever lingered for 3 days. She drifted between waking and dreaming, and when she awoke, she asked, "Did the snake survive?" The master's visitant, old nun, came to her bedside. "You were bitten," she said gently. "Yes, and yet you freed it." "Yes, why?" Kana looked at her bandaged hand. "Because I knew what it was like to be trapped." The nun said nothing, just smiled and bowed. The parable of the wounded one. A man was struck by an arrow and pulled it out. He saw his attacker limping, wounded by the same battle. Instead of shooting again, he bound the stranger's wound. When asked why, he said, "Because no one else had." Zen mercy does not always make sense, but it always makes a difference. Kana had every right to walk away, but she stayed. She had every reason to harden, but she opened, and in doing so, she healed more than her hand. The Buddha on non-retaliation. He abused me, he struck me. In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred will never cease. Dhammapada verse 4. The Buddha taught that forgiveness is not submission. It is liberation from the chain of reaction. We don't forgive because others deserve it. We forgive because we deserve peace. Kana did not justify the bite. She simply chose to respond with understanding. Modern psychology, compassion in trauma therapy. We speak of reframing the response. When hurt, the nervous system often defaults to fight, flight, freeze, but healing offers another path. Compassionate clarity. This does not mean excusing harm. It means choosing to see beyond the moment into pain, history, fear, and sometimes to act not from vengeance, but from vision. Kana embodied that. The snake's return weeks later. She returned to the same path, not to find the snake, just to walk. She passed the spot where it had been caught, and found something odd. A coiled skin, shed empty, like a thank you written in silence. She smiled and whispered, "You're free now." A practice, choosing mercy. Close your eyes. Recall a moment you were hurt, not small pain, but deep. Feel your body's response. Now breathe gently and say, "I honor my pain. I see their fear. I choose not to carry poison." You don't have to forget. You only need to not harden. Let your hand open. Let mercy flow through. Final whisper, the hand that doesn't close. Compassion is not weakness. It is courage that does not. Retreat to meet pain with understanding is to stop the cycle, to be the one who does not strike back. The snake bit out of fear, but you choose to stay kind. That is the strongest thing in the world. Story 21. The drum that never sounded. Background, distant wooden knocking, wind moving through paper screens, slow breath like air inside a dusty room. In the main hall of a forgotten temple, there stood a drum, large, heavy, made of black, oak and deerhide. It was placed on a stone pedestal, wrapped in red silk. No one touched it, not anymore. The silence around the drum, the monks swept around it. Visitors bowed before it. Children stared at it, wide-eyed, but no one dared strike it. Some said it belonged to a sacred ritual, long forbidden. Others whispered that it held the memory of war, a time when its sound called the village to burn. Either way, it remained untouched. For over 70 years, the boy named Ren was 6, a child of a visiting family who had come seeking blessings for spring. While the adults prayed, he wandered hands on stone, toes skipping between lines in the wood, eyes full of questions, and then he saw it. The drum, he stared, tilted, his head listened, but heard nothing, so he stepped closer. The first sound it wasn't intentional. He didn't strike it with malice or mischief. He simply touched it with his open palm. A soft thumb echoed through the hall, not loud, but deep, like something waking. He froze, so did everyone else. Then he smiled and struck it again. The memory that returned the sound carried through walls, through courtyards, into rooms where monks sat meditating, some with tears in their eyes, because they remembered not war, not destruction, but mourning. The drum had last sounded at the funeral of a revered teacher, a master who asked that his passing be marked not by weeping, but by rhythm, a rhythm no one dared revive until now. The head monk approaches. He walked into the hall slowly. Ren looked up, afraid he'd be scolded, but the monk only nodded and said, "It remembered you." Ren tilted his head. "I didn't mean to be bad." "You weren't. Then why is everyone so quiet?" The monk touched the drum. "Because we're remembering the parable of the sleeping voice. There was once a flute placed on an altar and never played. People feared dishonoring it. One day, a wind passed through and made it sing, and all who heard it wept not from sorrow, but from the return of what had been buried." Zen consum instruments are not meant to be silent. Their silence is not reverence. It is forgetting that to awaken them is not sacrilege. It is remembrance. The Buddha on expression, better than 1,000 hollow words, is one word that brings peace. Dhammapada, verse 100. The Buddha did not reject sound. He rejected noise. But a single sound made in truth, whether laughter, chant, or drum, can shake the illusion of separation. It reconnects, not through volume, but through vibration. Modern psychology, repressed emotion, and catharsis in somatic psychology. Unexpressed grief or trauma can store in the body, like a throat that never sings, hands that never create, feet that never dance. Expression becomes medicine, not performance, but release. A drum struck by a child may carry more truth than silence imposed by fear. The ceremony that followed that evening, the monks gathered for the first time in decades. They encircled the drum. The head monk bowed, not to the object, but to what it carried. Each monk took a turn, striking once, softly, like placing a hand on the shoulder of memory. the child who didn't know the rules. Rin sat nearby, humming. He didn't understand the past, didn't carry the stories, but he brought what they had forgotten: innocence, freedom, permission, and that was enough. The drum was never covered agate, remained in the hall, unwrapped, not played daily, but not feared. When grief came, they struck it. When joy came, they struck it. When silence returned, they listened. A practice, striking the inner drum close. Your eyes picture a drum inside you, large, round, dusty from years of silence. Now, imagine your hand, raised. Ready, let yourself strike once. Feel the echo, feel the memory it touches. Now whisper, I am allowed to sound. I am allowed to feel. I am allowed to live. Let the sound rise, then soften, then rest. Final whisper, the sound that sets you free. You do not dishonor truth by expressing it. You awaken it. You do not disrupt silence by making sound. You complete it. There is a rhythm in you waiting to be touched, not by force, but by honesty. So when the moment calls, let the drum sound, let the heart open, let the memory rise and fall, and know you were never meant to stay quiet forever. Story 22. The thread between the stars. Background: faint wind brushing treetops. Gentle flute echoing like starlight. The hush of a nighttime field. On clear nights, she sat alone in the field behind the village, wrapped in an old shawl, eyes toward the sky, waiting not for a miracle, not even for sleep, just to listen. Her name was Corey. Her son had died last winter. The silence that remained: he was 6. A fever that came too fast. A fire that burned too high. A breath that didn't return. They buried him on a hill that spring. The birds still sang. The sun still rose. But Corey stopped speaking. Her husband wept once, then busied himself with trade. But Corey, she watched the stars dot every night, as if one of them might blink back. The thread was something the old nun had whispered to her at the funeral. Love never dies, she said. It just changes address. Corey didn't know what that meant until the dream of the threads. She stood in the middle of a field, her hands empty, then felt something soft brushing her wrist. A thread, thin, silver, glowing faintly. It rose upward, disappearing into the sky, and in her heart, she heard him, not in words, in warmth, in the memory of a small hand. Gripping hers, she woke with tears on her pillow, and a new thought in her chest. He is not gone. The monk beneath the stars. Word of her silence reached the temple. A monk came not to preach, just to sit. They said nothing for many nights. Then, one evening, she asked, "Can you still be a mother when your child is gone?" He looked at her gently. Can a flame exist after it leaves the candle? She closed her eyes and smiled. The parable of the unbroken thread. A woman wept for her son who died in battle. A sage gave her a needle and thread. Sew into your robe what you cannot hold, he said. That night she dreamt of her son's arms around her dot, and in the morning she wore that thread with peace. Zen love is not in the body, it is in the bond. Form changes, connection remains. The Buddha on attachment and continuity. Nothing truly belongs to us, not even our loved ones, and yet what we give in love lives beyond form. Sutta Niptath Buddha did not deny grief. He simply taught that clinging to form blinds us to the truth, that love, when not bound to possession, becomes eternal, not as memory, but as presence. Modern psychology, continuing. Bonds theory in grief therapy. There's a concept called continuing bonds. It says we don't move on from the dead. We integrate them. We speak to them. We honor their memory. We let them shape who we become, and in doing so, we stay connected, not through illusion, but through living relationship. Corey's ritual each night. She lit one candle, held a cup of tea in silence, and whispered something aloud. A story, a thank you, a question, then looked to the stars, not to find him, but to remember. She never lost him, only his shape. Others followed soon. Other grieving hearts joined her, fathers, sisters, grandparents. No ceremonies, just stillness, one thread at a time. The field became a web of presence, invisible, unbroken. The thread was never cut years. Later, when Corey herself passed, they buried her beneath the tree near the hill that night. A child pointed at the sky and said, "Look, that star just blinked." His mother smiled and held his hand tighter. A practice, touching the thread close. Your eyes picture someone you've loved and lost. Feel the ache, the space they left. Now imagine a thread delicate, luminous, linking your heart to something above. Feel. It's stretched but never snapped. Now whisper, I still love you. You still shape me. We are not separate. Let the thread hum, let it hold. Final whisper, the space that connects loss does not end connection. It changes the language from touch to memory, from voice to silence, from body to breath. But if you listen deeply, beneath sorrow, you may hear the thread hum, soft, eternal, tolling you not backward, but deeper, into love that no death can undo. Story 23. The tea that was already warm. Background, soft clink of ceramic cups, faint wind against wooden shutters, the sound of water just before boiling. He had travelled far, with blisters on his heels, dust on his robe, and maps folded. So many times they had become unreadable. His name was Riku, and he was always moving, one master after another, one teaching, one mantra, one mountain. He was known across the regions as the seeker who never stayed. The next place he heard of a monastery in the southern hills, a place where monks drank tea that brought clarity, tea that revealed truth. Tea, they said, that healed the hunger of seeking. Riku packed his bag and set out, the temple of no hurry. When he arrived, dusk was settling. A soft orange sun curled over slate roofs. He bowed at the gate, no answer, so he knocked again. Still no reply. He sat, waited. Hours passed, just as he began to doze. The door creaked open. An old monk looked down at him. Tea? He asked. Riku blinked. Yes, I heard yours shows truth. The monk smiled. Then don't be late, and closed the door. The first morning he was woken by a bell, led to a small room, 2 cushions, 1 kettle. The old monk poured tea. Riku reached quickly. The monk raised a hand. Wait. Riku pulled back. They sat in silence. The monk closed his eyes. Riku fidgeted after many long minutes. The monk said, now. They sipped the tea. Was warm, but no vision came. No thunder, just steam. Riku frowned. The pattern repeats each morning. The same dot, silence. Pause, sip. Warm tea. No wisdom. No secrets. By the 5th day, Riku broke. This is just tea. The monk looked at him kindly. Yes, but I came for the truth. You did. I came for the warmth, the healing, Monk refilled his cup. You've had it each morning. Riku blinked. The parable of the unnoticed arrival. A man ran to catch the sun, believing it hid behind the hills. After days of pursuit, he collapsed in exhaustion. A child beside him said, "The sun was on your back the whole time." Zen seeking can become its own blindness. We run, asking, "Where is peace?" But peace sits, whispering, "I've been here," like warm tea. Ignored, the Buddha on craving and arrival. Craving is the root of suffering. But one who sees enough in this moment is already free. Dhammapada verse 339. The Buddha called this tad, the thirst that never ends. The mind says, there must be more, but awakening isn't elsewhere. It's here, waiting for you to stop. Modern psychology, arrival, fallacy in psychology. We call it the arrival fallacy, the belief that happiness lies in the next job, place, person, insight. But when we get there, we want more. Riku didn't lack peace. He lacked presence. The tea was already warm. He just never tasted it. The shift that evening, he didn't ask for meaning. He didn't expect anything. He just sat, felt the cushion, watched the steam. When the tea was poured, he didn't rush. He let the scent rise, held the cup gently, and for the first time, he tasted it fully. It was warm, and so was he. The next morning, the monk poured as usual. Riku bowed, "Thank you." The monk nodded, "Leaving soon?" Riku smiled. "No need, a practice. Sipping the moment, close your eyes. Picture a cup of tea in your hands, feel the heat. Smell the aroma, see the steam curl like breath. Now say, inwardly, this is enough. I am already here. The tea is already warm. Now sip, not the tea, the moment. Final whisper, you've already arrived there. Peace you seek is not in the next chapter. It's in the punctuation of this one. The breath, the pause, the silence. Before the sip, you don't need to run. You don't need more steps. Just stay. Let the warmth find you, because it's been waiting this whole time. Story 24. The wound that bloomed. Background, faint footsteps on gravel. The wind brushing through petals. Water trickling through cracked stone. He came to the monastery with a broken heart. Not metaphorically, he said it plainly. I cannot breathe, he told the gatekeeper. There is a hole in my chest. His name was Yuto, and the only thing heavier than the pain he carried was the shame he felt for carrying it. The garden of stones, they did not send him away. Instead, they assigned him to the garden, not the blooming one near the temple bell, the lower garden, the one full of cracked stones and dry moss. The earth is softer here, the head monk said. You can kneel without breaking more. Yuto bowed and began. The days of silence, he worked quietly, removing weeds, wiping dust from jagged rocks. Some had been split by lightning, others by time. All were imperfect. All were placed carefully. One morning, a novice asked, why don't we replace the broken stones? The head monk replied, because they've already bloomed once. The wound Yuto kept his own story quiet, but it lived in his hands, in the way they trembled when he touched anything soft, in the way his shoulders curled inward, as if to guard a secret. They say love left him, but it wasn't just that. He gave everything, and when it ended, he wondered if he'd been too much or not enough. He wore this question like a second skin. The unexpected rain-own day. While trimming vines, a thorn cut his palm. He pulled back, blood blooming against his skin. He stared, then wept. not because of the pain, but because it looked like the inside of him. Red, raw, honest. A monk saw him and sat beside him in silence. After a long time, Yuto whispered, "I'm afraid I'll never be whole." The monk picked up a nearby petal, laid it gently over the wound, and said, "Maybe wholeness is what grows around the wound." The parable of the broken pot. A woman carried water in a cracked pot. Each day it leaked. She apologized to the pot. The pot replied, "Look behind you." Along the path bloomed flowers the water had fed, beauty she had never seen, but always planted. Zen Konot, all healing is sealing. Sometimes it is growing with dot around, dot through, dot to. Bloom is not to erase the wound, but to let the wound breathe light. The Buddha on suffering and transformation. As a lotus rises from the mud, so too can clarity arise from sorrow. Dhammapada, verse 285. The Buddha did not promise escape from pain. He promised freedom within it. The lotus is not clean because it avoids. The mud it is beautiful because of it. Pain, held in mindfulness, becomes wisdom. Modern psychology, growth in trauma research. There is a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth. Not all pain destroys. Some pain deepens. Compassion, purpose, presence, not by force, but by turning toward the wound, not away. Yuto had spent months pretending he wasn't hurt, but the garden didn't ask for that. The stones only asked to be held, the bloom that spring. Something strange happened. A flower sprouted between two cracked rocks in the lower garden, small, dot pink, dot delicate, delicate Yuto. Stared at it. He hadn't planted anything, nor had anyone else. The monks smiled. "You've been watering something," they said. He knelt beside it, touched its petals, and whispered, "Thank you for growing where it hurt." A practice. Touching your wound, close your eyes. Place your hand over your heart. Now gently ask, where does it still ache? Do not flinch. Do not rush. Just breathe into that space. Now say, "I do not need to be fixed. I can grow around this. Let my wound become the soil for beauty." Stay there. Let the breath water the root. Final whisper. The garden within, somewhere inside you, is a wound you've kept hidden, perhaps for years. But what if? What if that wound isn't the end? What if it's a garden waiting, not for perfection, but for permission to bloom, to soften, to shine through cracks you were taught to hide? So breathe, touch it gently, and say, "Grow here." You may be surprised what answers. Story 25. The silence after the last bell. Background, wind shifting through an open temple gate. A wooden bell striker resting in stillness. Then one deep, resonant tone that fades endlessly into silence. The temple had stood for 300 years. Its stones worn smooth by feet, its beams blackened by incense and time. And at the center of it all was the bell, tall, bronze, suspended from a curved beam wrapped in prayers. Faded by sun, it was rung only once a year at the turning of seasons. At the beginning of spring, at the edge of something unseen. But this year would be different. This would be the last time. The bell keeper, her name was Sayo. She had been the bell keeper for 40 years. She had no robes, no titles, just a quiet devotion. Each year she polished the bronze, trimmed the ropes, swept the platform clean. But this year her hands moved slower, and she knew it was time. The empty ceremonial crowd came. No procession, just wind, birds and the hush of a world not needing to be told to listen. Sayo stepped onto the wooden platform, bowed once, twice, then took the rope in both hands, and struck. The bell sang. Deep. Low. Endless. The sound that stays. People say a bell's sound disappears, but Sayo knew otherwise. It didn't vanish, it settled. Into the wood, into the floor, into breath. She stood still long after the vibration passed, because something else remained. A silence unlike any other. The parable of the bell's last song. When the bell sounded for the final time, a boy asked the master, "Will there be no more music?" The master replied, "What you hear now is the purest note." Zen conundrums frighten us. We think silence means emptiness, but in Zen, the greatest sound is not the strike, it is the silence that follows, because it cannot be named, only known. The Buddha on cessation. There is a state where there is no coming or going, no beginning or end. It is the end of all noise, and it is called peace. Udanyona Bādani. The Buddha called this Nibne, the extinguishing. Not death, but the absence of clinging. The stillness beyond effort, the silence that is not void, but fullness, total, radiant. Whole, modern psychology, closure and inner quiet in therapy. We speak of closure, but true closure is not forgetting. It is integration. It is the quiet acceptance that nothing more needs to be said, that we are allowed to stop, to rest, to breathe without asking. Sayo's final BAFTA, the bell faded. She sat on the platform for hours. No thoughts, no mantras, just presence. When dusk fell, she whispered, "May this silence carry those who listen," and she left. The bell was never rung again, but its silence stayed. The visitors who came after years later, wanderers still visited. They stood beneath the bell, touched its cool surface, listened not to sound, but to the echo inside them. One said, "It feels like something is about to begin." Another said, "It feels like something has already ended." A monk replied, "Maybe they're the same." A practice, listening to the last bell. Close your eyes. Picture a great bell before you. Feel the weight in your chest now. Imagine it has just been struck. Let the sound ring out, then fade. Stay with what comes after. The ache, the space, the stillness. Now say inwardly, "I do not need more. I do not need to keep going. I can rest in what already is." Breathe. Let the silence hold you. Final whisper, the empty boat. This is where the journey ends, not with a lesson, not with a triumph, but with a space. You have followed 25 stories, through grief, through mercy, through love and letting go. And now, there is no bell, no more voice, just you, and that is enough, because silence is not absence, it is invitation to begin again, or to simply stay. So breathe, bow. And when you are ready, set your oars down. Let the empty boat drift. It knows the way. You've just journeyed through the empty boat, 25 stories of silence, sorrow, healing, and homecoming. If even one of these stories touched a quiet part of you, if a word stayed with you long after the sound faded, then this journey was already worthwhile. We invite you now to pause and reflect. What did this experience open in you? What memory did it stir? What silence did it allow? If you feel called, please leave a comment. Your reflection is part of this circle. Your voice helps others feel less alone. If these stories offered you peace, insight, or stillness, share them. Let them drift into someone else's day, like a bell heard faintly across water. And if you'd like to walk with us again, through more stories, meditations, and healing tales, You can follow this channel, the empty boat. There is no rush, no pressure, just a gentle invitation to come back, to listen, to breathe. Until then, thank you for being here, for staying, for listening.